It's always a distinct pleasure to introduce John Rechy, who I met here first in 1993, and then at Harvard in 1997. He's always a very gracious, generous person. I found that out through the years. He's one of our own. His parents were Mexican immigrants who crossed the border in Paso. He's a Los Angeles person now who has been here a long, long time. And he also taught here at UCLA at one time. So in a sense, he's a Bruin, a Mexican, and an Angelino. And it's my pleasure to have him here, for him to accept the invitation to come to the class. As I say, he's always a gracious, generous person. I could go on and on about John Rechy. He's in a sense, the writer from Los Angeles, the one who has been given awards by the Penn Group, the only LA writer to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Penn Group. And though we've been reading The Miraculous Day of Amalia Gomez, his novel of 1963, City of Night, has been influential in a variety of ways. We were playing The Doors, LA Woman, and of course the refrain in that is City of Night, City of Night, City of Night, of course. And there's also, Are You a Lost Angel? And the Lost Angel also refers to an article that John Rechy wrote. So there's numerous references, and I'll show you the images, then we'll talk, and I'll ask John then about, first beginning with his life. Let's begin with the origins. John Rechy in El Paso, and he has written eloquently about the border, crossing the borders. Has written on Jim Crow in Texas, about white supremacy. He has always acknowledged his Mexican culture, his Mexican heritage. He has never said, no, I am not a Mexican. He has always said that. And then his life parallels then the beginning of the Chicano movement, 1965 on. And in 1970, he wrote about Chicanos and the Chicano movement, including himself in that movement, or identifying himself also as a Chicano. So here's someone who was writing before the movement, but as the movement began, this is in the Saturday Review, where he wrote about no mañanas for today's Chicanos. This is the time has come then for this movement. So in a variety of ways, an important intellectual here in Los Angeles. So you don't mind, John, I'll start by asking you some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, sure.
There's some water here.
Sure, I have water for you. John Rechy is always interesting, insightful, provocative.
I've got to take that down in my notes.
Yes, and he stirs up the waters every time I've heard him speak. So it's a great pleasure to have John Rechy here.
Pleasure to be here.
Any words for the students, John?
Well, I did read the outline of the course, and I did tell Hector that if I'd been a student, that's the course I would have been sure to take. There wasn't anything like that when I was going to school, but so anyhow, I'm very, very, very pleased to be here, and in this particular course that I'm sure I will learn from.
Okay. And Paso.
Yeah.
Tell us about your parents. They came from Mexico?
Yeah. They both came from Mexico. My father was born in Mexico, but his parents were Scottish, but born in Mexico, sort of strong affiliation. My mother was born in Chihuahua, and at that time, the revolutions were flaring. According to my mother, you never knew from day to day what side you were on. The political theater changed. And actually my mother crossed the river into the United States without knowing that she was in Texas. And later, my empathy for so-called illegal, which I don't like, but it identifies them. My empathy is aroused because my mother was arrested at the border. She didn't have papers, as they say now, and her mother was living in Chihuahua, and her mother was dying, and so my mother went across the border thinking nothing about it. When she came back, she was arrested and held. It was a nightmarish time because I kept thinking. I mean, I was a kid. I mean, really a kid, maybe 5 years old, and all at once my mother had separated from us, and it was terrifying, and I couldn't understand what it was. She wasn't kept in custody for long. My father managed to arrange her to come back. She didn't. She didn't become a citizen until way late, 70 or something like that, and she never spoke English. I mean, I don't know that that's a plus or a minus, but her affiliation was very strong, and we spoke Spanish at home, which is the situation with a lot of people, and then we learned English in school.
And you say that your name Juan was changed to John.
Yeah, that may be an amusing story. So I think it's supposed to be amusing too, right? I didn't know any English when I went to school in Texas, and I went to Lamar Grammar School, and there was a deadly kindergarten teacher. It was really deadly creature. And, she had us play, one of those simpleton games that they torture children with. I can't explain it to you. All I know is that we had to pin balls of yarn on our backs without knowing what color. And then we had to be twirled around, and she counted up to 10, and we had to guess what color was on our back. It was something that she had concocted to torture, and she did. But when she began counting up to 10, and my name is Juan, and that is what it is, Juan Francisco, and she would start counting 1, and I heard 1. And so I would go right up to her and say, no, and this flustering thing, and then she'd call again, 1, and I would go and say, 1. And so she changed my name to Johnny, and thank God that the NY fell off. But then, it stuck, and I've always regretted it because I think it'd be such a romantic name, Juan Francisco. That's the other, it's just John. But yeah, so that's.
And you started writing. You always wanted to be a writer. Is that correct?
Yeah. And a painter. I was interested. I wanted to be a painter, and I was also an actor as a kid.
With the Fabregas.
Yeah, Fabregas. Yeah, big actress, very famous in Mexico too. She had a traveling company, and I'm proud to tell you that I played the Christ child. A little boy. Yeah.
So you started writing at 16, and you had novels at 16.
Yeah. No, I had started before that.
Before that.
Yeah, and I used to draw comic books too. Yeah, panels with comic books. And I started. Seriously, I started a novel around age 13 maybe, and believe it or not, it was a novel about Marie Antoinette. A very sympathetic novel about Marie Antoinette, because I'd seen the movie and I couldn't believe that anybody would chop her head off. So I was writing a book in which she got saved. I never finished that particular book, although it went up to, I was writing it longhand. And then along the way I wrote a very serious novel called Pablo. But then by then I was an adult.
And that novel, Pablo, was set in Mexico.
That's right, and the Yucatan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was based on Mayan myths. The whole structure of the book was based on Mayan myths, very mysterious myths, very wonderful myths about the moon and sun. The main one was that before the earth was created, the sun and the moon were waiting for their assignments and from God, and they looked at the moon, especially fell in love with the sun. Of course, it would be the woman who would fall in love with the sun, being a man, even then. But then they were placed in opposing orbits, and only when the moon lingers, sometimes in the sky, does she ever get to glimpse the sun. So anyhow, that's the myth, and it's a myth that fascinated me because it suggested a theme that I always explore. You know, the theme of impossibility. You know, certain things cannot happen at all, and never will, and they form a certain body of exploration, as it were.
Mhm. And then you published City at Night, but we'll go back a little bit, because you were born and lived in poverty,
Yeah.
in the government projects,
Yeah.
in El Segundo barrio, which is right across the border from Juarez. And when you got the money for City of Night, what did you do with your mother?
Oh, okay. Well, a little back up. First we lived in El Paso. We lived in a pretty good street, not yet in a barrio, and then that was during the Depression. Then everything went, and then that's where we got to move to another section. We kept moving as poverty decreased. We kept moving closer and closer to that section. Then I wrote several pieces for the Nation, then Evergreen Review, El Paso Norte. I wrote several of those, but in the interim, I went to Los Angeles. Then I started traveling from Los Angeles. Well, from El Paso, I went to Los Angeles. I did go to college on a $50 scholarship. Let's see. Yeah, I traveled during that time. I lived in New York for a time, San Francisco, Los Angeles, St. Louis, Chicago, New Orleans. Must have been some others. And then I wrote City of Night without. I mean, that's a curious thing. I never anticipated to write that particular book or use that particular subject. Did not. I had been caught by myself in New Orleans in a very, very bad time of my life, and I was it was very despondent. And during the Mardi Gras Carnival, you know, if you were under an influence of anything, you could imagine what the carnival would look like. Those creatures, monsters on floats and throwing out glass beads and everything. And it was a terrible time. I fled back home to El Paso. And then there, I wrote a long letter to somebody I knew and about the carnival and what had happened. And I wrote this long letter. I didn't realize I hadn't sent it, but I came upon it, and it sounded good. And so I rewrote it in story format and sent it to two literary quarterlies, and both of them accepted it. So I gave it to Evergreen Review, which was the #1 at the time. And then the editor of that review, which was very adventurous at the time, asked if perhaps I was writing a novel based on it. And I thought if I said no, they wouldn't use the story. So I said yes, and it was almost finished, which was a lie. I never hesitated to lie. Never. Because that's what a writer does. But because of that, the editor became very interested. We met, and he wanted to see the rest of the novel. There wasn't any. But when certain sections appeared, including Maria, I started getting solicitations from agents and publishers, and then Grove Press heard about that and offered me a very modest, very modest advance. And I took it and signed the contract for it, and still not writing it. I didn't go back to writing it for 3 years. I continued to travel around, and finally, a friend of mine helped me financially, and I went back to El Paso, and I wrote it there, and out it came. And now it's been 50 years. The 50th anniversary of it is coming up, but with a new edition of all kinds of stuff.
I was telling John that we're going to have something in the fall for the occasion of the 50th anniversary here at UCLA. So you'll be back in the fall?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah. You wrote that with the money you got from City of Night, you bought your mother.
Oh, what? Yeah, I had always wanted to buy my mother a house. I didn't like, it's part of, I'm not embarrassed to say this, it was part of being, the shame that you feel for being poor. It's ridiculous, of course, but it is real, And I didn't want my mother to live in the government projects, though she felt nothing about it, it was comfortable. But eventually, when the money came from the City of Night, I did buy my mother a house, and she lived there till she died. And that was a big accomplishment that I felt sense of triumph. So,
yeah, the Evergreen Review was known. It started in '57.
Yeah.
You were published, I think, in those first 2 years, '57 and '58.
I was about 58, yeah.
And it became known as the Journal of the Beat Generation. Virtually everybody, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, etc., were published by Evergreen. And then on the south side, the translations that appeared were Juan Jose Arriola, Juan Rulfo, Octavio Paz, Carlos Fuentes. All these young writers appeared in the Evergreen Review. And then a Mexican American from El Paso was also then a part of that new, in a sense, literatures that were coming out of the United States and out of Mexico. And I wondered, did you ever translate anything for Evergreen?
Yeah, I did. I translated German Drinking Beer by Garibay. That appeared on Texas Quarterly, and then I translated an interview with Elena Poniatowska for Evergreen Review, and then I translated a story, what is it called? I forget, another story, Emilio Carballido. Yeah, so I did translations, and I was asked to, consider to translate Pedro Páramo, but I wouldn't have attempted that. That was it's difficult to translate, very difficult to capture the writer and then in another language. Well,
And you read Mexican literature, you know about that, and Latin American literature too.
Sure, but not that much. This is something that has really annoyed me very much, and one of the reasons that I'm so happy to be here and with this formidable gentleman is that for one reason or another, early on, I don't know how it happened, because I had written about Mexican situations and everything, but I was dismissed from being a Mexican American or Chicano writer. It was very weird. And some discussions about whether I really could be considered a Chicano writer, and it became rather nasty sort of thing, no anthologies that would include me. It was nasty, and the narrator in City of Night clearly identifies himself, and in all my books, this is true. I think that the context of homosexuality upset a lot of Mexicans or whatever because of the entrenched machismo or whatever. I mean, it almost seemed like they were saying that if you were gay, you couldn't be a Mexican, and if you were Mexican, you couldn't be gay, which of course was ridiculous. So anyhow, so when City of the Night came out, it created quite a stir. I'd gone to visit somebody in New York and stayed with him. And one day I was on the subway, and there was a gentleman reading a book that I recognized, from City of Night, but the cover was another book.
It was on the bestseller list even before it was published.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was surprising. I fully expected that book would get terrific reviews, literary acceptance, and then wouldn't sell. Then the jolt was when the whole thing reversed. Before publication, it was a bestseller. It was a bestseller for almost 7 months. It reached #1 in some places. Everything. The reason I say that is because it was the reverse of what I expected. And then the reviews that first came were deadly. Unbelievable. The first review in the New York Review of Books, the publication date, was titled Fruit Salad. And that was really vile. For 30 years, I fought with the New York Review of Books to give me space to rebut that son of a bitch. And finally they did, and I wrote a terrific rebuttal to the man who unfortunately was dead, having set fire to himself. So that was it. But the reviews were, one after the other came, deadly. This one had set the tone, and then about halfway through, everything shifted. And then the reviews turned, wonderful. And now, it's all right because it's very, very praised and that sort of thing. But I had a whole career after that. It's a strange thing. People will sometimes say, oh, I read your book. And I've written now 16, I think. And I'll say a little testily, which one? And then the answer comes, City of Night, of course. But, that's okay because the others will get attention from that.
And City of Night was influential. You can show the slides of the doors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's you.
Yes, I see it. I see it, yeah.
I used to look like that. Of course, this is in Paso, the river.
Oh, wow. And that's me.
Smelter town that you write about, right?
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yes. El Teatro Colón, which is now.
The Colón Theater?
Yeah, now these are children's toys.
Oh, my God.
So it's no longer.
Oh.
Yeah.
I used to shush the Mexican ladies in that theater. They wouldn't shut up on these wonderful a Mexican soap opera, like nothing. It makes the American soap operas look, subtle. And then to go to the movies, and then the Mexican ladies would say, Don Carlos va a venir con la bonita, pero se va a ir, and conjecturing. And it was so annoying. I remember I was a kid, 12 years old, and I would turn around, shh. And then women would be, pues que tiene.
And this is 1957, and there you are, John Rechy. So it must have been the first.
That's
the first issues, right?
Oh yeah.
They
Oh
came out.
wow. Oh.
Yeah, you're there with Leroy Jones, Malcolm X,
Yeah.
Tennessee Williams.
Right.
Yeah. So this is the.
Oh, that shows something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Next. Yeah. And this is another. This is to
Oh,
show the
yeah.
class about what the Evergreen Review was all about. At that time. Yeah. So, of course, this is the iconic image of
Right.
Jake.
Right.
Next.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And this is from, I'll read it. This is from the city of Los Angeles. And it's themes that you repeat in City of Night, also in The Miraculous Day of the Morning Woman. So I'll just read. John Rechy's second publication for the Evergreen Review was devoted to his adopted city, Los Angeles. In closing his The City of Los Angeles, he wrote, "To Southern California, everyone comes. To think you'll be cured with sex, religion, junk, cool nights, etc. Or to cater to personal grudges by joining the Los Angeles police force, and so attain to holydom and omnipotence and wear the stick like a mighty scepter and the badge like a sort of misplaced halo, and become merely another gang in a many gang rumble and brag about it." So in City of Night, and especially in The Miraculous Day of Amalia Moments, you call attention to now the 1988 Dalton Gang incident, when the LAPD ran through that section and then wrote a placa, LAPD rules.
Oh, yeah.
That's in there.
And I had direct confrontations with some of my articles. That one particular event was just really horrifying, which is what I meant there. And I think it was in that piece that I mentioned the cop's badge. There was I was driving from UCLA home up Los Angeles, and I saw a man getting mugged. It was night. It was about 10 o'clock early. It was not a gay area or a gang area, but this slight man was getting mugged. He had his groceries, and these two guys, were beating him, kicking him, and the groceries were on the floor. And I stopped the car and blew my horn, trying to get them off. And then I got out, and they ran, and I helped the man, and after he said, "Go to the hospital," he said, "No." But I asked him to get in the car, and then here comes a cop car, and I waved him because those guys were still there. I waved, and they wouldn't stop. I followed them in the car, and then finally they came out with guns aimed at me, and I said, "This man got beaten up. These guys are still there. This just happened." And they said, "We're on another call, buddy." And off they went. I took him to a police station, bloody, and the old guy at the desk. And I said, these guys were, this man, who just incidentally happened to be slightly effeminate. It was not a cruising area, it was nothing. He just happened to be effeminate, and they were mugging him for his groceries. And the cop looks at this man and says to him, "What'd you do to those guys that they mugged you?" I mean, that suggested that. Anyhow, I wrote a piece for the local paper, Los Angeles Times, about the incident, and then I was investigated by the special police. The two cops who fled were put on paid leave for 2 weeks, and I think this. But anyhow, it created quite a bit of a furor, and the chief of police said I was a clever writer with a way with words, and I wanted that put on the back of my next book. But, it's hard to believe that out of that came a prepare for melodrama, like from the Mexican novella. Out of that came an attempt to kill me. It's unbelievable. It's just, I used to go to a certain area in Los Angeles, the cruising area park, Barnstall Park, and everyone home. And right after that, I parked the car, and another car parked, and two guys that I swear were cops, but they were plainclothes, came out with a lead stick And of course, I wasn't going to get out. And I pulled the car back, and they came at me. And as I passed, it hit the sticks. And I rode to a place to call up the police, because I was still not knowing this. And then the man said, well, where were you? And I said, yeah, I described it. And he said, go back there where you were and wait, and we'll go. And I rode back into that place. They followed me halfway, and then when we were reaching there, they turned around and left me in the same spot where now that other car came up. And the guys with the stick after me again. It was pretty harrowing, and you know, it's clear that they were responding to their buddies for having been taken on. But that was the situation that existed in Los Angeles for a long, long time.
And this is late at night. There you are.
Oh my, look at that. Wow. Oh. Wow, who made that?
And of course the Doors did the LA
Yeah.
Woman, right, with the refrain,
Yeah,
City at
yeah.
Night, City at Night.
And he used to, according to Danny Sugarman, who wrote Nobody Here Gets Out Alive about Morton, he used to ask, I wonder if Richie stands like this, and he wore, at the time I had a costume, leather jacket, the open shirt and boots and everything. Asked, I wonder if he stands like this or whatever. I never liked him, but he was okay.
And this is David Bowie,
Yeah.
who has said that you were influential on him.
He's unfaithful. Unfaithful. Sometimes he says Jack Kerouac, then me, and then when otherwise he says me, then Jack Kerouac. So there's an ambiguity.
This is Lou Reed.
Oh,
Certainly
oh yeah.
influential on Lou Reed and the New York music.
Very much.
Velvet Underground and
Yeah.
Lou Reed too.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Thanks. Tom Waits.
Oh yeah.
He has a song based on a character.
Yeah, Looking for the Heart Saturday Night. And I used to use a nom de plume. No, it wasn't a nom de plume, nom de street. I called myself Jack Chance, and I wrote an article about Jack Chance, and then Tom Waits used him as his hero in that album, Saturday, Looking for the Heart of Saturday Night. He's terrific. He was quite up.
Yeah.
He is terrific. Yeah. Wow, Tom Waits.
And there's something about David Lynch's movies that remind me of your work.
Yeah.
In a 1977 interview, you were asked about suicide.
Oh yeah.
And you responded that when your mother was sewing, and there was a piece of blue velvet cloth that fell.
Yes.
And that as a child, you picked that up.
That's
to
right.
have something beautiful in your pocket or to put it up against your skin.
Carry
So
it around.
that is what I think of
Blue velvet.
blue velvet.
Mm.
The fetish, right, or the blue velvet is part of this film. And
Yeah.
I don't think if there's been any acknowledgement from David Lynch that that central,
That's
moment of blue velvet is really from you. I mean, that's the way I think of it.
Yeah.
It can't be mere coincidence, right?
No, I take it for deliberation.
Right. Yeah, so blue velvet, yes. And then Mulholland Drive, in the night scenes and LA,
Yeah.
also it seems taken from your work. And I don't know, has David Lynch has never said anything about Mulholland Drive. But I know you've written about Mulholland Drive.
Oh yeah, it's all over.
Yeah, I read,
It's all over a lot of my books.
yeah, and you gave a lecture at SC that I was present, from Sunset Boulevard
Oh,
to Mulholland Drive.
yeah, I did.
So you've read this script and know about it, right?
I do, I
Yeah.
certainly do, yeah.
Anyway, I think it's your work too.
Yeah.
Next.
Wow. That's pretty
And
good.
this is David Hockney. who said when he was in England and wanted to come to California, the books that he was reading, the book was John Rechy, City of Night. And so that too in visual art, the next one.
And his painting of Pershing Square is based on, that's my description of it, but there's an anecdote about him that he tells when he wanted to go see Pershing Square because of City of Night. It says that it's on Wilshire. He was in Santa Monica and saw Wilshire, and he was using his bicycle to travel. So he thought, well, Wilshire, Pershing Square, and so he took off from Santa Monica on his bicycle, thinking that eventually he would get to Pershing Square, which of course is miles and miles and miles away.
And so this is also, they say, John Rechy, inspired. Next. That's the Splash, it's a series of paintings.
Yeah, wow, that's right.
And then we come to
Amalia.
so the Miraculous Day of Amalia Gomez, which is your 10th novel. After writing 9 novels, and you write about Los Angeles. It's Los Angeles, as I told the class, you know, between the Rodney King beating and the uprising that followed the innocent verdict, you know, the Rodney King incident. And what you tell us about Los Angeles, or Los Angeles that's changing. Now I sound like a professor. Los Angeles that's changing, you know, the new immigrants, the Central American immigrants, a Mexican woman that takes the bus from El Paso to Los Angeles, among those who come in.
Yeah.
And it's a different Los Angeles than 57, 58, 59.
Very different. Yeah.
Very different. And maybe you could tell us about Amalia and how she came to you.
That's one of my favorite books, definitely. And Amalia is a very beloved character of mine. That's really, but she emerged very dramatically, if I may say so. You know, Michael over here, the very blonde young man, is my mate, and he was. It's ironic that he was responsible for my writing that book in a way. I was sunbathing in Griffith Park. I looked up at the sky, and here come 2 clouds and formed a cross. And I thought, wow, what would a woman from my background, a Mexican woman from my background, think if she had been here and seen those clouds intersecting for me? And I thought, oh, of course, she would think it was a sign. And so I rushed home, and I very hurriedly wrote, in first draft, a story called, I think, The Miraculous Day, or something like that. And I finished it. It was just a draft. I was going to work a lot on it. And then I read it to Michael, and Michael said, oh, wow, that's quite a character, what a story. Got to write a book about it. And that snapped. And then I had to, some people ask if Amalia is my mother. Not at all, not at all, not at all. But I knew the women from the projects. I knew her, and one especially. And my sister Olga had a lot of spirit like her. I wanted to see her, and then I thought, well, you know, I've seen the Magic Cross. Maybe I'll get to see another thing. And so I went to a drugstore to get a sunbathing seat, and they said no. It always fascinates me, the perfection of coincidence. You know, how perfect a coincidence is. When a coincidence happens and you look back at what happened, you'll see that it just worked perfectly for the coincidence to become inevitable. And that always fascinates me, and this happened. So he said, don't have any here, but if you go down farther along the street into a Mexican section, then they'll have them there. Okay, so I entered this drugstore to get the chair, and I almost fell back. I saw a woman. I have never seen anyone like her in my life. She was gorgeous. I mean, in her own way, she was incredible. She had black wavy hair, she had big earrings, and she had very prominent, beautiful breasts. She was showing off with a ruffle, and she had slit skirt, pump shoes. I mean, she was unbelievable, unbelievable. No fashion except her own. She was her own creation, and she was dazzling for it. And the way she walked along the aisle, and ooh, she was really something. So I thought, I got Amalia, and I followed her. For just a bit, following my character. She couldn't let go, and then a Mexican man, shorter than I am, and with a very aggressive mustache, stepped out in front of me and said, "Boss," he was with him.
Right.
And I said, "Pues nada." And then she was delighted because I'm sure she could see a fight. But anyhow, then I drove around the neighborhood and found exactly where she would be living. And then I got out of the car and walked the same walk that she would take and everything. And everything about Amalia fell, and you know, she just took over. I've never had a character like her, truly. You know, you hear about, well, the character did this. I mean, truly, that the sensation of Amalia refusing to stop the disaster that is going to fall on her, may fall on her, was breathtaking. I couldn't bring myself not to be honest to what she was experiencing. So anyhow, there it is. There's my Amalia. She's a favorite.
Just one more. The poverty, or extreme poverty, sometimes causes insecurity or fear as you go from your own particular neighborhood to something further away from you. And you have Amalia walk through LA. I mean, you've taken us through what is now called the fashion district, but it's not called the fashion district until recently. She was a worker there in a sweatshop. Then she lived in Hollywood. You take her through Western and Fountain, Pico Union. And then you end the novel with the Beverly Center. And you know, it's the strangeness that one has in seeing opulence and wealth and labels that you use in the book. And at the same time, as people are seeing you, because maybe you don't belong there, you know, that it's not necessarily a place no for you. And then she realizes that they're looking at her funny or whatever. I think those are experiences that come from deep down somewhere, though, about.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of what I brought to Amalia and the incidents came from the people, especially the women in the projects, and their children. Amalia's kid who commits suicide in jail, or the kid, an actual kid that I've used before in a lot of my work, Manny. He was put in solitary confinement at Huntsville. I wrote a story about that. And he finally he committed suicide. The mother could not accept that, but I gave that over to that. But the despair that occurred, especially among those women, I have to say that there were fathers that came back and forth, like the one next to us, this lady. The guy would come, and then she'd be pregnant, he'd go away, and but they had also a lot of spirit. I wanted Amalia to, and this is where the manipulation had to come in. She was so real to me that I knew that the way she was moving, she had to move toward total disaster if she was to survive. And it was painful to me to watch Amalia move from horror to horror to horror to horror and not realize that she had to face certain things. And without facing those things, there would be no salvation at all for her. And so, it's a scene that I worked on for, if any of you are writers, you may appreciate it. A scene that I worked on, I don't know how long, to get the way I want it, is a scene where she goes to church and confronts the Holy Mother and says to the Holy Mother, "You're a woman like me." And then I tried to orchestrate it so that her whole decline would emerge in defiance when she says, I ask, I plead, I pray, and she stands up and says, I demand a miracle. And then, of course, she's at the point where everything will change for her. But she still has to be even more drowned in horror before she can possibly. And I think that she will triumph after that. I hope.
Okay. Questions from the students or comments that you have?
I just wanted to make a comment that that reminded me a lot of like Pirandello in Six Characters in Search of an Author, how his characters just like run away from him. They have a life of their own, kind of like Amalia. Yeah.
What is the book?
Six Characters.
Six Characters in Search of an Author.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
very much so. Very much so. I do like, the how characters come into a work and everything. I've written a paper, that's the one I gave at Merced, on how a character develops, how characters come. And by way of saying that other characters take over the author, I used Don Quixote.
Mm-hmm.
And Cervantes clearly detested Don Quixote, I think. And he tortures him, he ridicules him, the most ridiculous man in the world, that he does, and he makes him such a ridiculous figure. And indeed, he confesses that this is a man that she's going to ridicule. But now look what happened. Don Quixote took over. And if you ask people, Don Quixote, Impossible Dream, and the movies and everything, and he's a character, who triumphs, and that's not what the author intended, clearly. And then you ask somebody, do you know who Cervantes is? Oh, no, I don't know who that is. You know who Don Quixote is? Oh, yeah, he's the guy who does this and this. So imagine that. I mean, a writer detests his character, but that character is written so well that he doesn't not only fight the windmills and the giants, but he fights the author and wins. I mean, that's really something to think about.
Other questions over here?
First, thank you so much for taking the time to come visit our class. We really appreciate it. My first question is, when writing these novels, do you have a target audience in mind?
Can you tell me?
A target audience in mind when you write? Are you writing for?
No, I don't. Well, I think certainly a legitimate question. There are genre novelists, and continue the same thing, and write the same genre. Mystery writers do that and become very successful and please their readers. No, I don't. I don't really. The book just shapes, and then that's how I move it on. That's how. Are you a writer, perhaps?
A little.
She says a little bit.
Oh, no, you got to do a lot.
Also, have you ever written something that you tried to get published but was never picked up?
Ever written?
Something that you tried to publish and it was never picked up by a press.
Oh, yes. Yes, the book I wrote on Marie Antoinette, I never finished. But after that, I wrote a really hard-hitting expose on high school. Really. Let's see, did I send that out? Some book I sent out, and I very ridiculously didn't say that I was 15. So they sent it back. I suspected if I had said I was 15, they would have been kinder. Then there were a crucial chapter in City of Night was rejected over and over, and it was almost like it had the potential to ambush the whole book. It's a chapter called Miss Destiny, The Fabulous Wedding of Miss Destiny. And I had been published in every review, sent that one, and it was rejected. I couldn't believe it, and my editor was my champion, said, change it a little bit, change it a little bit. I did, sent it back. It was rejected again by Evergreen. And then my editor said, send it to this new big table. And then I did, and that's what got all the attention, and I got a prize.
Education. You said you went to college.
Yeah.
In El Paso. Was this now what's known as
Texas Western.
Texas Western?
When I went there, it was called the Texas College of Mines and Metallurgy. and it was a lot of rich cowboy sons of miners and pretty blonde cheerleader type girls. And we had to climb hills to get to classes. It was very, very rustic. Then it changed and became Texas Western College, and now it is an extraordinary university, really. And the woman who's at the helm of it, I mean, it's something like 80% Latino, Chicano, whatever the thing, and she's converted it into this really superb university. Hardly, mostly Mexicans. So fitting, that it should be transformed. But when I went, it's pretty reactionary. I became editor of a magazine called El Burro. El Burro. And I took over and I went to make it a literary magazine. And I was fired.
Yeah. And New School for Social Research, did you go there too?
Oh, wait, I was rejected. I have a block about admitting that I was rejected. But when I got out of the Army, I'd been in the Army in Germany, 101st Airborne Infantry Division. I didn't fly, the Airborne Infantry Division, but it was a famous group, and the great thing about it, there was no war, but we got the best uniforms. Wow. We could blouse our boots, and we had a blue scarf, and blue lining, and a screaming eagle here. So we really looked great, and that is the good thing about that one. But after I got out of that, I was going to Columbia, and then I applied to Pearl Buck's writing course, and sent my book Pablo to her. And apparently she says she didn't think the subject would be one that she would like to address. So I sent it to the New School, and then I was accepted there. But years later, I was invited to teach the course by the woman who had rejected me. The same course that Pearl Buck was teaching, and she didn't let me in. I was invited to teach. So again, it was a perfect accident.
Questions? Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about what happens to the instead?
What happens
To Maya?
After. What happens to Amalia? You have any thoughts after?
to,
that
oh,
day?
I don't know, and I worked on that ending very, very carefully, so that if you believe that the Holy Mother did appear to Amalia, you can sustain that, because all the indications are there. If you believe, however, that the things that were happening that were violent, the shards of glass, were simply the reality of what happened, then you can say, no, she didn't have a miracle, but the miracle would be in that she actually says, no mas, which of course is the battle cry of the Chicana movement, and that she remembers that her friend said to her, think, Amalia. And when she thrusts that man away, to me, that is when she will not be able to live. She's faced all these horrible things. And yeah, I think she became a feminist, a strong feminist, organized the Chicano women and the government project, and then came to Los Angeles and became celebrated for her determination, and organized all kinds of other oppressed people and ran for president.
Hey, which can happen now. That happened now. Yeah. Back there.
Would you say most of your influences are just from life, or do you have literary or cinematic models or inspirations?
This is about inspiration from literary models or experience in your work.
In my work,
Or film.
Or
Or film. Or film. Or
for my character,
Influences.
Yeah.
influence. Yeah, you know, a writer is influenced by everything, of course, but usually my characters have very firm antecedents in reality. That is, I've known the people that I write about. In City of Night, every main character has an antecedent, but not always. Sometimes you convert characters. In a book called The Vampires, I converted some very exotic people on an island to vampires and stuff like that. It's very difficult to answer because, yeah, and in movies, I'm very, very influenced by movies, a lot. And I like redoing scenes, you know, from movies, paying. There's a difference between homage and pillage. So you have to be very careful that in paying homage to movies, you're not just tearing away from them. And yeah, I do a lot of, I replicate a lot of scenes but in a different context from movies. So I would say that movies really are profound influence. I was very influenced by comic books when I was a kid, very influenced by the exaggeration, which is very, very Mexican, you know. Melodrama is of the essence in the Mexican culture. You know, like in the semanales, you ever see those? And so, yeah. But I think, you know, whole spectrum.
Or the song of Bernadette, or Amalia Gomez.
Oh, of course, yes. The Song of Bernadette, yeah. Is very, very much a part of my, she's seen it and she uses that to proceed with things. Now, one of the books that influenced both my life and my work is a book called Forever Amber by Kathleen Winsor. And that book, when it came out, the church was against it and all kinds of things. It was a vile book and everything, and it was wonderful. And I you know, and it's so brazen, so wonderfully and very, very popular that it did influence me a great deal. Yeah, you're influenced. You never know really what's going to influence you, do you? You just walk out and be influenced by somebody here.
Yes.
Easily.
Kind of like, do you think there's a parallel between LA and Amalia? Like, she has to go through all this pain and suffering to get where she's at and become kind of like a free person, so to speak. And LA, like you talked about, all the violence and the LAPD oppression that was going on in LA. Do you think that LA is in a place now that has gone through all that pain and suffering, and do you think that there's solution now, or that it's different? Do you have a different view of the LAPD in general?
Yeah, you're connecting the city with the experiences that you.
I guess. I mean, you grew up in an LA that's so different from today, you know, where there was so much oppression and violence. I remember the Rodney King beatings, but
You know, I don't think this is an answer to your question, but I do want to say that I find that things have not changed as much as one wants them to change. They only seem to develop into different areas. I find Los Angeles changing a lot geographically. My goodness, yes. But a lot of the oppressive actions recur, and certainly prejudice is very much so. In the jails, you know, we're having all those problems about what is happening in the jails. So, do you feel that things have changed? You're so young, of course. I don't know what you're comparing with it, but from reading, you feel that the city has changed?
I think that the growing minority population is transforming Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that is true. That is true, but I don't think it's but it has changed that it's being, fought for. It's still being fought, but very few things are being granted. I think very few things are being granted. I think, you still have to fight the obstacles, maybe not in Los Angeles, but the obstacles to voting, which are formidable, all those things still have to go on. I think that the problems do remain, but change, and become less dogged, more easily changed, I suppose. You?
Well, I think of Amalia Gomez, your book, as in some way looking to the future, if I can say that. Miraculous, and the other woman is Rosario.
Rosario, yeah.
And Rosario seems to be a very strong woman.
Yes.
Someone who might, in the future, do something in the causes related to downtown Los Angeles.
She's already moving in that
She's already moving in that direction, and one can think of the 2006 and the new immigrant civil society downtown that LA had never seen a march like that it saw in 2006.
Right.
So that's, in that sense, Amalia Gomez, I don't know of any other writer who has captured all those groups in one novel, and those possibilities that she already planned.
Thank you very much, because that was the intention, to present the whole way. Thank you very much, that's good. But there's also the daughter, Gloria,
Uh-huh.
and of course she represents something else.
Uh-huh.
And they, and the one thing, they are having a pride in being a minority,
Right.
not shared. They make fun of the one young man
Right.
who wants to disguise his origin.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yes, uh-huh.
I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about your love affair that you have with Los Angeles, as a city, as a lover, as an ex-girlfriend, as a future wife or husband. How do you negotiate this city that has shaped so much of your trajectory and your work?
I love Los Angeles, and I love Los Angeles for the very reason that it is criticized. I think all the areas that are criticized badly are the areas of exception, the excess. I love excess. There's a quote from Mae West that's being used for the liberal arts movie. What is it, Michael? It's, we read it. Excess. So I think
Too
this
much
is wonderful.
Too much, but more is wonderful.
More is wonderful, or whatever. Yeah, but see, I think Los Angeles in Technicolor, the colors, and the obsession on physicality. I love that. I love the obsession with bodies, you know, and health, and vibrancy, you know, and the obsession with looking a certain way. Los Angeles has a look. People in Los Angeles have a look. I mean, whatever level they exist in, there's a kind of awareness of themselves, representation. I love too that it's really the end of the world, and I love the beach, and especially, you know, when it's evening and it's the blue hour, blue haze before the sun disappears, and then very often you see these beautiful bands of haiku players that stand at the ocean and dance their movements, and it's so beautiful. It's like acknowledging the coming of night and celebrating it at the same time. And I think that there is that ponderance of celebration in Los Angeles. Excessive, yes, but it's kind of like a dance before the void, you know. It's a performance, and I think that Los Angeles is very often a theater where everybody performs. And you know, I love the places, I love the flowers of the city, and yeah, there's just so much that is so great, and unique, and to put down. But I think that is exactly what's so fine about the city.
Any more questions? Yes.
Mr. Rechy, I think of you as a very Catholic writer, and I see that throughout all your work. And but in a lot of your work, you've had this theme of the characters finding a substitute for salvation. So can you comment on, because they seem to be opposed? You know, you're very spiritual, but yet the substitute for salvation theme seems very existential.
You know, the phrase that you picked up is one that's in every one of my books, so obviously it's something that I feel about. What I do feel is that you know, we are all betrayed very early because our expectations of salvation, in whatever form, are unreal. You know, if you are religious, the expectation of salvation through heaven and good deeds and everything, which is, to me, a mythology, just a mythology, that can't be fulfilled at all. And then as you move in life, you try to find a substitute, but there isn't one. Nothing can replace that. But then the substitutes do become, you know, wealth, sex, drugs, or whatever. And really the important thing is the search for it, rather than the acquisition. And then, of course, that would be very, I don't like the word existential because it's so overused. You used it well, though. But then it becomes very Sartrean. I mean, like that. And you know, about religion, this isn't original. A lot of people say this. Catholics lapse every day. But again, you know, the matter of influence is like about Los Angeles. Who is not going to be influenced if you go to a Catholic church as a kid and see that Technicolor epic? Wow, you know, gorgeous statues, male and female. I mean, they're all beautiful. They all look like movie stars, and they're dressed in robes and color and makeup and everything. and the men are very muscular and dressed very briefly. The women, of course, are much more chaste. But who's not going to be influenced? And also, a favorite subject of mine, in a negative way, who's not going to be influenced by the celebration of pain and martyrdom? Because the whole religion is celebration, even in art, of pain, martyrdom. And of course, I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anybody, but the figure of Christ that sits in the front on a cross, bleeding, and he's a beautiful man. Sit-ups that could make those abdominals really hard. It's very, very true. I mean, that is a hunk. And a very brief cloth for the front, the cover. And then right next are the women kneeling in front of him, all clothed or so devoted. Well, that to me is a representation of, pain and goriness and everything, and sexuality. Because that sort of presentation is so sexual. The visuals are so sexual and yet so painful that the two are intermixed. And I think that accounts for a lot of the celebration of masochism. And I am amazed with that book. I started to read it because I wanted to find out what it was, but it was so bad I couldn't read more than 2 pages. The 50 Shades of Grey. I couldn't. I mean, no. And I'm not a snob about literature. Popular literature is fine. It serves a purpose, and if you want to write bestsellers and you aim for it, that's fine. And people want that kind of writing. Yeah, okay. This book was so awful. 2 pages and I couldn't select through it. But I know what it's about, and I just don't, this really is baffling me. I don't know who to ask. It is baffling me. It is about a woman surrendering to a man through a series of masochistic, sadistic orders from him, masochistic acceptance and birth. How does that jive with the direction that women are taking and must take to shed that slavery to the male, whereas here it is exemplified so brutally in the actual acts. I don't understand how women are celebrating this book, and they are. Millions of copies sold to women. I don't understand that. I don't understand it at all. Why is this book so very popular at a time when women are moving away entirely from oppression and command? I don't understand it. And I read Salon all the time, and they never answer it. They praise.
Well, Mr. Rechy, please excuse my absence. I just drove in from San Diego, so excuse if this question has been asked.
I'm very sorry.
I just drove. Sorry for my absence. I'm not being late. I just drove in from San Diego, but I want to ask the question because you brought up the intermixing of celebration and pain, and I was curious what words or what advice or what consejos would you leave young gay men of color looking for identity within literature to celebrate themselves? I know that your work has inspired me, and when I discovered you through Omar, it gave me a literary heritage to hold on to that contemporary Chicano scholarship and discipline hasn't done. So I was curious, what would you say to young writers, novice writers like myself, looking to sort of contribute to literature and to reform and sort of pick apart the ugliness and make it more cute? And I'm talking about Chicano studies coming from a PhD program.
What would I recommend that a young writer like yourself explore, move into? For what purpose? To change the world, justify? All those things are good.
To reimagine a world where young gay men of color can thrive, specifically Mexican American Chicano men.
Where color?
Where young gay men of color can thrive and be celebrated and be reimagined in this new world.
Well, I mean, that's so noble, so much to desire. Yes, indeed. Indeed, if you move into that area and explore it, the only thing is that you can confuse. I mean, in the gay sector, there's so much confusion with hoping and getting, as Pork says in Gone with the Wind. Asking ain't getting. Saying that everything is okay, and it's not. A lot of the tensions that I see in minority groups are banned from discussion under the identification of political correctness. You know, I see a lot of things going on that I think should be bluntly spoken about in all areas, but you don't dare. You do dare, and I would say yes, dare, but then you open yourself to accusations. Certain things won't go away unless they are very, very clearly looked at and investigated. That's the sort of thing that I would love to see, more investigation from within the ranks to. In certain areas, it's not happening. It's violated. You're a traitor. I have felt that sort of thing when I've written critically about certain situations, and it's not too acceptable to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I would say dare to do it.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the class and on behalf of Chicana and Chicano Studies, I would like to thank you for the third time, once again, coming and accepting my offer to be before a class. And if you look out there, when I started teaching, I had 10 students that would show up, for my class. And now we have these classes over 70+ students. So
It's very impressive.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. And, and, again, the faces are so wonderful that they seem receptive. I've really noticed people seem to listen, which is not often true. And, it's been a pleasure. It's really been a pleasure. And the questions have been awfully good. And the pleasure being with you. What a course you got. I really, I would be sitting there. If I had been, I would have. So you're lucky.
And he wrote, when he said, I think we can work something out. Yes, I will be there. And then the following messages, it said, it will be a pleasure to be with the students. And so that's John Rechy.
Yeah, it
Thank
was
you.
a pleasure.
If you want him to sign books, can you sign them?